Lana, how would you go about hosting a Matchbox card tournament?
Well, I would definitely need to set rules on what cars are allowed and what aren't. Perhaps I would get in contact with a local Matchbox car organization and see if they could sponsor or somehow support the event. I need to create a guest list. I would need to create some kind of track in my apartment. I would need to probably get like refreshments, get an email list ready so that everyone involved knows when things are. Uh, and then I guess we just have a blast. Pasquale, Lynn, you need to build a robot that will one day replace you.
So I'm going to start taking advantage of a lot of the recent advancements in AI for the brain. I'm going to assume that that's kind of on the side while I build out the physical robot that's going to replace me. I'm going to need to go to Home Depot and order large metal sheets from which to craft the robot body. I will also need some sort of glove or soft material for the hands for it to do all of the tender little touches that I tend to do in my daily life. I would need to order a new set of clothes that is just as the clothes that I wear, but robotic friendly, so not gonna get stained by iron or anything like that. I would have to, I guess, most likely make a mold of my face to implant onto the robot so that it could go about my daily life and do things without people noticing. And probably the last thing, once I've implanted the brain into the robot, I've constructed the body, is to shave my head and put the hair on the robot so that it can act as me.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Muprov Musings. This is episode number 76. I'm one of your hosts, Hal Munger, and joining me now on the line is your clerical host, Julian Bernardo.
Clerical and clinical has always been a little bit hard for me to differentiate, but clerical to me, I think it's good. I've been trying to take a lot more notes recently and like trying to keep to-do lists. So I'm very bad at being clerical, but I've been thinking a lot about it recently. So I'm glad you noticed that, Hal. In reviewing my notes for today's podcast, I realized maybe there's a bit of a misunderstanding. I thought it was supposed to be me and you, but I guess we did let in a guest today. And this is fun because we've had, our fair share of repeat guests recently, but we have a very awesome member of the New Play family to introduce to you today. Introduce to you today. Welcome to the podcast, Lana.
Hi.
Lana was the assistant director for New Play, the producer for a New Play, the costume manufacturer for a New Play, and the stage manager for 2 nights of a New Play, and really everything else that happened in a New Play besides performing. Lana had a role in, and Lana is also a super talented improv performer who is a member of the Stanford Improvisers. So she's got a lot of expertise on a lot of things, and we're going to be trying to pick that brain today.
Yeah, I guess one broad framing that I have in my head that I'm interested to see whether you agree with, Lana, is we've talked already on the podcast this season about how like it was a difficult thing for you to be director and playing in the show, like wearing both of those hats at the same time can be difficult. So Lana, it's my recollection that it was very helpful to have you as part of the production to sometimes bear some of the directorial hat when Hal was playing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my job was just to make sure the whole thing didn't like go off the rails. So yeah, leading a couple rehearsals, making sure. Well, because Hal, I don't know if you remember this, but you were on this like quest for more cubes.
Yeah.
Like weeks where you were just trying to like find every single stage cube on campus and deliver it to the set of a New Play. And I think that took a lot of energy. and someone had to like do the other stuff while you were doing that.
Yeah, I mean, producing has a lot of different elements to it, and I feel like a lot of them are quite random. I remember I was taking that class at the time for theater makers on campus who were in charge of productions, and everyone else would be having normal check-ins, and the new play check-in was always like utterly ridiculous about the problems that we were having. They were just very different from a scripted shows. But I was wondering, Lana, do you still have our Notion?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'd have to look. Is that what you do want me to look?
Yeah, right now.
Yeah. And while you look, I wanted to do a miniature check-in. Just about before we get into the Lana interview, I just wanted to give a pitch to the things that I'm producing right now, because I'm producing a bunch of things that the listener could take part in. One of them is the Unscripted Shakespeare Festival, which is happening May 23rd through 26th in New York City. It includes 30 hours of shows and workshops, and we've got amazing teachers coming in, some from different parts of the country, to teach those workshops about improv in the style of Shakespeare. I'm doing all the production work for that right now, and we're about to post. Probably the workshops will go live around the same time this episode goes live. And then also Thorn and Pedalstick is going to the Edinburgh Fringe. So we're going to be there for a month this year. And I'm doing all the production for that too.
Wait, how many people are going to Edinburgh?
How many people, or how many people at a time?
I didn't know that they'd be different answers.
I think at any given moment, there will likely be two people performing in the show, but those two people may switch, and one of them will always be me. And sometimes there may be a person playing piano in the show.
Cool. Well, we can talk about this later.
No, it's fine.
I also have to just, I went to the Unscripted Shakespeare Festival last year, and it's just super fun. Anybody who came, who was just part of the workshops, ended up like wanting to come for the shows, because truly, I don't know, it's just such I think a lot of improv, like doing improv in a structured way with like a theater, can get, I don't know, there's like a lot of bureaucracy or whatever. And obviously, like Unscripted Shakespeare Festival is organized, but I think that there is like a nice like personal spirit to it. So you if you come to the Unscripted Shakespeare Festival, you will get to talk to Hal for like hours on end, and just learn a lot about Shakespeare improv. So
yeah, and Lana's going to be there too, right?
Yeah, as of a couple hours ago. Yeah.
Awesome. So, you know, we're in the space of thinking about producing improv stuff. Lana, am I right in maybe assessing that often in the improv decision room that you are something of like a realist at times? And that it's just my sense, I guess, that a lot of like improv planning suffers from like getting ideological things downstream from doing improv. And so I think that people tend to want to do things a bit last minute, wants to, it just improvise the whole thing. Do you think that you bring a little bit of the opposite energy to that?
I mean, it's been so long since I've actually produced an improv show. I don't know. I feel like when you're putting on an event, generally, like everything is details. So you just have to, I don't know, be on top of that.
Yeah.
How did it work for Lana? Has been producing a bunch of different shows recently. One of the biggest ones was puppet musical called Huppet. Were you the producer of Huppet, or how did that all work?
No, Sebastian and Anna produced it, but I helped a lot. But that was mostly just because, like, when you make something that's so self-driven, mm-hmm. and you are the self driving it, like you kind of have to be the one to push everything.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't the producer, but you know, I like need all the props because no one else would, and like.
So how? And that kind of then gets into like once you start to get these sort of random tasks propping up, like creating all the props. How does one do that? If you were hosting an improv show, let's say, and you wanted it to be, water exploration themed, like submarine prov, and you wanted to make a, you know, basic set props kind of vibe for it, how would you go about doing that?
Making a set for an improv show?
Yeah. Or props or design or any of those elements.
Well, that's something we did for a new play. And how we went about it was I took you to a place where you could buy a lot of different objects, and we kind of just held up objects and we're like, how does this make you feel? And the ones that made you jump up and down and scream, we bought. The other ones we didn't.
Yeah. That was specifically like a scrapyard, right?
It sort of. It was like a used art supply store that took a lot of donations of like random objects. And so they had cool, cheap, random shit. I don't know. If I were to do it again, it's tough with improv because you don't know what's going to happen. And so you have to have so much junk. But then managing it is like a problem. I don't know. I think the sets in improv I've seen work are usually just like theater cubes and like black chairs.
I think like extending a little bit beyond improv, how doable do you think it is for someone to like grassroots, like build like design elements for like a small scale show that doesn't have a big budget? I mean, it seems like you probably have a lot of specific experience with doing this, and so I think obviously you're going to be better at it. But is this something that is doable for, you know, a group out there who has 5 people and they've got $1,000 to put on a show? Do you think that there is a path towards like getting nice, cheap design for a show?
I mean, I think this is true of most poorly funded like art. Is the hardest thing is just getting people who are good at what you want done to commit to doing something without receiving any kind of payment or like justification. I think that's just much easier to do when you're a college student than when you're not, because people have time. They're trying to be a certain person in college. I think that goes away a little bit, but I mean, definitely. I don't know if design was like the most successful aspect of my show. I think it was a pretty poorly designed. Well, I'm not going to say it was poorly designed. Our designers all worked very hard, but it was amateurly designed. I think that's possible. Obviously, we had the boon of getting to use Stanford like space, like the theater and rehearsal space, and the place where we built the set. All of our set pieces were made of like salvage wood from other set pieces over the years. So we didn't really pay for wood. And I think that was also a huge boon. But I mean, you don't need flats to put on a show like in your backyard or whatever. It was a backyard.
But so when you're using all the salvaged wood, are you what kind of tools do you need some sort of workspace there?
I mean, yeah, we had a workspace and tools. That's obviously like a hurdle, but you don't like really need a set.
Yeah.
For a new play, it was funny. A lot of it was done socially, so a lot of our set pieces that were bigger or built came from J.J. Winterstein, who was the father of my sophomore year RA.
And someone who was in my first ever improv class.
Yeah. So I just had befriended him, and he happened to own or like somehow be involved with a junkyard, and he drove over a car full of all these junk objects and some objects that he had built. And that was another big component of the set. So I feel like a lot of it is just telling a lot of people what the problems that you have and being open to silly solutions in the improv setting. Like there was a while where we were thinking about like, you know, having people's family members be on the light board and stuff like that. Or one show in the Unscripted Shakespeare Festival, we really wanted to have music and the musician was out, and we just, you know, taped down little markers on the minor, major keys on the piano, and then my mom played the show. So there are a lot of ways you can work around to get something that really actually feels great out of a scrappy situation, if you're willing to be open to the possibilities of the world around you.
The scrappy stuff is what's fun, I feel like. There was one night of the musical, our bassist was busy. I think he was going to a concert. And so we had someone I'll play the bass part on the piano, just like pitched down. And also a lot of the puppets were made with the help of like a local kid who I met at a show and just really wanted to help. I mean, I could have reasonably done it without her, but having her help was huge. And I think it's just like great for everyone. I don't know. And I feel like when I make things, they're mostly made out of trash.
Yeah.
That's good for the planet too. Yeah. You've got a big thing right behind you, Lana.
Yeah, I want to be clear that I didn't that wasn't like a conversation piece. This was hanging up in my room earlier and I forgot that it was there until I signed on. Yeah. Do you want me to talk about it?
Sure. It looks like a giant whale or something.
Yeah, it's a giant whale. It's the reason it's hung up in my room is because I can't hang it up in the living room, and this is the best way of working on it.
This is a blue wireframe whale for everybody else. Hanging from the roof of Lana's room.
I just bought, this is not trash. I bought these off Amazon, which I felt bad about. Just bought all these lights, and I'm going to put them inside the whale. And then cover the whale with this blue fabric that I got at another sort of like recycled fabric store. And it was crazy because usually when you go like thrifting for things, it's kind of a toss up whether you find what you want. But I was like, I really want blue gauze because it's a whale and I want the light to go through it. And I managed to find like a perfect blue gauze.
Wow.
It just feels like Kismet.
And when you're going thrifting for non-clothing supplies, where do you find those venues if you're in randomcity.us?
It depends. Like, I mean, obviously just do some Googling, but a lot of stores will have like fabric recycling nonprofits or art supply recycling nonprofits. And sometimes we'll have like storefronts. But I mean, yeah, I feel like big artsy cities are more likely to have them. But I don't know. In SF, there's Scrap, which is where we went, and that place is awesome.
We can keep riffing on this kind of stuff, but I'm maybe interested in jumping from craft design world to just like Lana world a little bit. Maybe Lana, it might be interesting to hear what brought you to like improv in general. I think that if I had to like nominally say what you are, I would say you're like a writer. And yeah, what brought you to improv? Does it relate to other like arts that you like to do? And I guess what specifically do you like about improv?
I feel like it's funny because I feel like our friends who do improv mostly come at it for different reasons.
Yeah.
But I come at it for the most like guessable, stereotypical reason, which is that I like being funny. And improv not only makes you funnier, but it's like an outlet for that and for performing that kind of way. And then, it's just so fun.
Yeah, it is very fun. But I guess since you came at it from that direction, I think that a lot of like the stuff that we preach on this podcast, at least, is like talk about Muprov. This is the kind of improv that we do, and we're very grounded in not playing above the character. Very I guess Muprov is like suited often towards like dramatic, like narrative improv. You clearly like over our tenure, did a lot of this kind of improv. Do you like this like heavy narrative drama focused improv as someone who came to it for like comedy purposes?
I think I'm split on it. I think that it's very hard to really effectively do dramatic improv. I think we often failed at doing that. Because I don't see much point in performing if you're not satisfying an audience somehow.
Mm.
And I think where we always succeeded and where I personally enjoyed the most is where we were somewhere in the middle, where it's like improv lends itself to comedy just because it's like bizarre and unexpected and idiosyncratic. Each performer kind of does things that only they would do. And I think when we managed to capture the inherent absurdity, but also use kind of tools of more dramatic improv, so like strong character building, meaningful relationships, a forward moving plot, and managed to keep the kind of, the only word that's coming to mind is vibe, while still kind of managing to keep it like lighthearted. I think that's when we were most successful. And that's when I enjoyed it the most. That's what I enjoyed the most.
Yeah, I mean, this is giving like maybe new play night 4 vibes out of the new plays. I'm interested to puzzle through this. When do you think that like our style of dramatic improv fails?
I mean, one has to be a very good actor in order to pull it off believably. I think that's just a challenge. And it's hard to bring the like intensity and specificity required for, melodrama. It's hard to make that work with improv because, you're still figuring out as you go along. So you have to be just a lot more like, if you're trying to be funny, you can screw up all you want. And it's fine because it's still funny. But if you're trying to like make a point, if you're trying to be a believable character or, inhabit a believable situation, you can't screw up, because screw up meaning like name people the wrong thing or forget details or misunderstand plot hits such that two people think two different things are happening. That can't happen because that doesn't happen in like real life. So if you're trying to do something that mimics life, then it just seems sloppy if you do those things.
That's very real, and I don't disagree with any of those points. But I'm interested specifically what your kind of response to that is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of those points either. I think actually recently I've been tending more and more in the direction towards liking things that are funny, although I still don't really like comedy as a genre. And I feel like there's a lot of genre elements in comedy that I'm totally uninterested in. I agree with you, but increasingly I've now been exposed to improv that's happening at a high enough level that they're able to do that. So it's more of a goal to set. It's possible that it needs to be done by different people than the people who put on the other improv shows that you were talking about as being successful. So yeah, that I feel like one of the biggest takeaways that I kind of learned is like, if you like what you're saying, if you want to put on a show that feels like a play, you kind of need actors who would have the skill of acting at the level of what you would look for if you were putting on a play. And you also need them to have extremely high improv skills. So it's a hard thing to put on, and there are probably only 50 people on Earth who really have that skill set at the moment, and I'm not counting myself as one of those people. But I think that number can grow a lot, and that there are very few people who are focusing right now on gaining that skill set. And that if given, even a fraction of the time that's dedicated to a scripted play, time, energy, and training from a younger age, I think that people could totally do it, and it would be awesome. And you would just get a different scripted play every night.
I think that, and I'm not saying that dramatic improv can't be successful. That's not my intent with this. But I do think that there's a way in which dramatic improv can, I don't know how to put this. Like when you read a novel or you watch a play, like a piece of dramatic work that is really carefully constructed, then there's an understanding that like the author is trying to tell you something. And it's perhaps based on like experiences, either through the author's life or through their research that are like rooted in reality. And I think that argument can be made for improv in the like subconscious sense. Like people bring to improv their subconscious tendencies and the way that they see the world and the tropes within it. And improv is kind of this like theater of the subconscious. But if you're approaching fiction as something that's supposed to, you know, maybe supply a worldview or bring credibility to a perspective, then dramatic improv kind of fits like into that in a really weird way. Like I'm not sure it accomplishes that goal.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I just saw a show that I think is a strong counterpoint for this though. Because I think what we're not as used to shows that are as heavily directed or designed as what is possible in improv. So like recently in Improv Amsterdam, we had them on the podcast. Emmerich and Charlotte were directing a show called Improvise Festen, which is based on a movie and in which the movie is about childhood sexual assault, and it takes place over the course of one dinner. And during the dinner, someone in the movie accuses someone else of assaulting them as a child. And then over the course of the dinner, people start out not believing them and eventually kind of believe that person. So that was the show that they were putting on at Improv Amsterdam. Was this is all going to take place on a dinner table. It's going to be a 1 hour continuous show. They always had it so that by the end, the victim was believed by the person. And at the start, the people did not initially believe them. And the point was that they were trying to show the audience that regardless of how someone is acting, even if there are things that make you question whether or not, you know, the victim is telling the truth, that there are always going to be those things in society, and that like the majority of people who are assaulted as victims are not believed or have any recourse to it, and that a victim can kind of look like anything. And they did a lot of explaining to the cast sort of the psychological elements that they were trying to portray. And then it was really amazing to watch because sort of group mind and psychological elements of the family played out in real time. And you could see the way that suddenly all the cast members would kind of team up on one person and they would all shift their attention to another. And it was like, whoa, I'm actually watching, I'm watching something about human nature that's kind of making me a little more aware of, you know, my initial prejudices in the world.
It makes me wonder though about this, like, it feels like the holy grail of what we want to be able to do is to each night be able to do something that has that level of, you know, actually capturing some interesting facet of humanity while also not knowing going into the night what it's going to be. And as you bring up like more directed or structured forms of improv, this is just something I've thought about a little bit, but like, I don't know, there's always been something in my head of like, you could have like a writer or something for your improv show who is like maybe collectively with the audience taking some suggestions and then like outlining like a broad, like, you know, something at the level of what you just described. These are the main swings of it. These are the main like emotions we want to hit, but then still have the actual show be improvised by players. And I'm wondering, yeah, it feels, I would hope that maybe we don't even need some role like this, and that if we just got good enough that we could really just go out there and do something really cool each night that is different and real and whatnot. And obviously it would fail sometimes, but yeah, I'm just wondering how necessary it is to pre-plan things if we just want to tell more visceral or real stories.
I think for the Festen case, you would need to pre-plan it. It's like you would need to make sure everyone was educated and safely could interact with the topic.
But as a result, if you ever wanted to like, does that sort of imply that we can never really have improv troupe that is night by night improvising like stories like that? Which I mean, that's also fine if like we can never improvise like Festin just like off the cuff. But what are the bounds then of like obviously I think like that show sounds like particularly it's dealing with a very serious topic that needs to be treated with care, but I guess maybe there's like a middle ground of shows that are about things that are very real and very serious, but are more okay to mess up some of the details on.
I don't know. I always think of it just like, there's an expanse of possible shows to improvise. And what we are doing in practice is, exploring and lighting up parts of that map. So I think there are always going to be some things that you just wouldn't be able to improvise just because, our cast doesn't speak this language or our cast doesn't, have any experience with this topic. And I don't think that's true of every art form. But I think that what you're doing, and at least what a new play's goal is to expand that range of what can happen really far. And obviously you lose a lot of the specificity thing, right? There's no way that the set of a new play, if it's a submarine show, is going to be as detailed as the set you could make if you knew the show was going to take place in a submarine beforehand and you studied submarines and you had everyone, in period costume in a giant submarine, and everyone had watched 100 World War II movies or something like that beforehand. It would just be a very different show. But there is something to be gained, I think, from seeing the players experience a submarine for the first time. And there is something kind of magical about specifically watching that problem solving happen among the physical improvisers of like, holy crap, they just on the spot came up with a way to make a submarine. So I don't know. I think that we always talk about amazing people on the podcast as kind of one of the primary, like we want to make them laugh, but we also want to make people go like, whoa, there are people working together.
I guess I think more specifically, I know what I'm going for now. In that, like, can we improvise a show that feels like there was like a point to the show in the way that a lot of TV shows or movies? It feels like by the end you get what the showrunner, the creator was going for. This is like a story about blank. And yeah, can we have an improv show that feels like it has that level of intent? Maybe is the specific goal.
You think so, Lana?
I mean, I feel like what I'm seeing is like there's this kind of like I guess spectrum that improv can exist on in terms of like how planned it is versus how spontaneous it could be. And I think that it just has different affordances. And like if you want to tell a story and you want to make a really specific point, you can do like you're talking about with that Festin group where it's like really all they're improvising is like who is taking what role in this already decided scenario. And the dialogue, of course. Oh, I mean, of course it's still improv, but it's like the boundaries of what they can accomplish are limited. And it's perhaps that limitation that allows them to make a very specific point. And so it's just, I think it's just like, what is the goal of the production? Is it trying to say something? If it's trying to say something, that maybe it does have to be more limited. Or is it trying to create something out of nothing and like amaze the audience? And maybe that's better for spontaneity. But it does feel like it's impossible to get all of those good things in one show.
Well, if you were designing a show, specifically, let's say a show that involves puppets, because that's something that has a big design element. Let's say you were designing and directing an improv show. I'm kind of wondering on that spectrum, what are some things that you would want to bring to it?
Well, puppets is interesting because conceivably one could leave okay, let me start over. creation of a puppet is like necessarily tied to the character that you're trying to portray, because it's not like you can just automatically create a human or animal or living form that does all the things that that living form can do. Like, necessarily has to have some kind of limitations, and so you want those limitations to work for the character. So like, you could build a puppet. Often puppets don't have every part of their body like move in the way a living thing would. It's like, if you have a dog, you don't need the dog to be able to open its mouth necessarily, but you need the dog to be able to run, because that's what dogs do. And if you're making a person, you definitely do want its mouth to move, but it maybe doesn't need to like walk super accurately if it's not important to the character. And so it's the same thing where it's like, you can either have really highly realized puppets, but accept that there'll be limitations based on the character, or you can have puppets that are super, super abstract, or maybe they're just human forms, or even just like objects, kind of like you did with a new play, and allow spontaneity, but then accept that there'll be a bit more imagination required of the audience.
Yeah.
How,
Go.
if the Nightery had required us to have puppets in the show, how would you have wanted the new play puppets to be? I mean, they would be this abstract thing, right?
Oh yeah. New play puppets specifically, and I've already thought about how to incorporate puppets into a new play and what I would kind of want to do. One of them would be Lana. What do you call those sort of white body puppets? You know what I mean?
I know what you mean, but there's not really like one word for it.
All right. Well, those things, obviously, you'd want a lot of them. Then, if you wanted to, I think it could be cool to have like almost sort of like Mr. Potato Head style puppets, where you could kind of change what was puppeting about them. But I think the bigger thing would be the new play really lends itself to large scale puppets conducted by multiple physical improvisers. If there were some, just giant puppet eyeballs and giant puppet noses and giant puppet, hairs that you could kind of swap together and be held by 5 people to make, like now we're talking to the dragon or the bug queen or whatever. Although those aren't very new play style creatures. I think that those kind of giant facial puppets would be the parts that I'd be most excited about for a new play. But Lana, also for your thing, like something we didn't do in The Sims a lot, but I've seen elsewhere more and more increasingly is improv where the characters aren't improvised. So the whole team practices in a specific character, and they know how to play that character really well, and then the scenario is improvised. And like I've seen this for like improvised Star Trek, where they were just using the real characters from Star Trek to put on a improvised episode. But then I took a workshop where we all built a character over 2 days, and then eventually did it. And I've also seen a puppet show where they all built their puppet and they gave their puppet a personality. And then, it was just in the town, the puppets were talking to each other about whatever issues were coming up. And in some ways, those shows have tended to be better, like you were saying, for the audience than your average improv show. Because, again, it can be more practiced and rehearsed, which is an interesting thing.
Yeah. And of course, if you're using characters that are somehow recognizable to the audience, and that can be like, playing Star Trek characters, or it can be playing like archetypes,
Right.
Puppets lend themselves well to archetypes. Because, a puppet can be like an old man or like a chicken. The ancient archetype of the chicken. Yeah, and I think people can understand that better. Or it's just less challenging for an improviser to...
It's all cyclical. We're just going back to doing commedia dell'arte.
Yeah. Which, I mean, is basically puppets. Masks are basically puppets for your face.
Yeah, for sure.
Back to Lana, I think, or I wonder, as someone who like does a lot of writing and just like thinking about words, do you think that bleeds through or ever bled through into your improv? I think that like dialogue is one thing, for example, that I don't know. It's like probably one of my weakest areas. And it's one of those things where I imagine if you've written a good amount of dialogue, then you're probably better at improvising dialogue.
Mm, I don't know. I feel like maybe the one way that it came out was when we were doing Shakespeare. And, you try and create all these like huge extended metaphors. I feel like writing prepared me well for that. But I don't know. Like writing and improv are so fundamentally different. One is like taking the like mush in your head and trying to refine it as much as possible. And the other one is taking the mush in your head and just like throwing it at people. I, I think they're almost like opposite processes.
Yeah.
I think improv makes one better at writing, but I'm not sure writing makes one better at improv.
It depends on what type of improv you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe jumping more to like your improv sensibilities then. What kind of improv do you really like to do most then? Like we went on this sort of dramatic tangent. It seems clear that you like a lot of like the spontaneous joy, lighthearted stuff. But yeah, like what maybe specifically formats or any specific experiences that you have that are like the improv you have the most fun doing?
I mean, I love doing musical improv.
Yeah.
Just because I know a lot about songs and singing and stuff. But I feel like I love the sort of like improvised movie kind of format, generally, where it's just like we have a vague concept, something that allows every person to kind of really lean into a super specific character and to see how those characters interact and build something. I don't think improv should ever last more than like 50 minutes. I think the improv show that lasts more than an hour is a crime. Every time I've been in a show that lasts more than that, I feel bad for the people watching it.
You would not have liked, I just attended the London 50-hour improvathon, which is one continuous 50-hour show.
Yeah, that's going so, that's its own thing.
I didn't watch the whole 50 hours.
I'm sure nobody did.
I think some people did. It's one continuous narrative.
That's crazy.
They do it.
It's funny. It's funny because it's hard enough to explain what happened in like a normal length improv show. Anyway, so what was it like?
Yeah, they do it like Doctor Who, where they like if someone sleeps, they get regenerated.
It's funny hearing this conversation just because it does feel like you two lie on like far sides of a spectrum, and maybe in some ways I feel like I'm down the middle. For example, like caring about the audience is one of these things. I feel like how you do not tend to care much about the audience. Yeah, I mean, it's nice that we have a mix and a spread of us.
And that was a big part of what made a new play work was the difference between all the people in the group. You put 15 owls in a room together, it would have been a fucking disaster. And, they wouldn't have ever left that room. So I think that this, like, we had a lot of conversations like this, I feel like, in the lead up to a new play. And the place that I started was so much more extreme than the place that it ended. And the place that Lana is always much closer to, like, reality.
This just feels like a general property of like any group of people who makes a thing. Like it almost is always better for people to exist at like opposite ends of the spectrum rather than everybody lie at the middle. I've been doing like this group project over the past semester with this partner who is like super meticulous about all the details, and I guess I'm the Hal in the relationship here. And yeah, it's the exact same thing where we've converged on this final thing that is probably what neither of us really wanted at the beginning, but I think it's good.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, it feels like maybe that is the other rung of, I don't know if you call this production or whatever, but just the logistics of improv. I feel like so much of it is like people management, no? Like
Mm-hmm.
putting together the right group of people and then knowing what the people's tendencies are to know who to like tamp down in certain directions. Maybe Lana, either in improv or other sort of like positions of authority that you had in like theatrical productions, like do you have any lessons for people management or the right types of people to put together? Obviously it's going to be very dependent on what the project is, but have you learned things?
Hmm. I feel like I don't know if this is exactly in line with the other things you were saying, but you really just have to be nice to people,
Mm,
like above all else,
yeah.
because no one wants to be a part of something that makes them feel bad. And when I was doing my show, like the amount of like frustration and like suffering that I took on so that the other people I was working with would be slightly less stressed out and suffering less. Um, I mean, to some extent, it's just like what you got to do.
Yeah.
Especially if you're the one who's going to benefit the most from it, like you just have to make everyone else's lives as easy as you possibly can because they're already asking so much of them. Um, I don't know. I feel like in complex collaboration, that's less of the case than with like a scripted play. Um, with an ensemble, obviously, you want things to be more equal and you want to be able to get along and like, but yeah, just doing what you can to make other people's lives easier.
Yeah. I think it feels like most of these types of just putting on a production, you almost always need someone to be the sink for all of the just like issues, stuff that falls through the cracks, like pain, misery. Like I don't think that it would have worked. I mean, obviously in Simps we were an ensemble and we would cycle through roles, but every quarter there was someone who was in charge of like the show, and like probably it was like the director who was like the misery sink for that quarter.
Mm.
uh yeah, and I think Hal, probably I would assume that your experiences like post grad have not been dissimilar and that you just needs like one person who's like making sure it's getting over the line, and I expect that you were the one person for a lot of things. Like do
It,
you think, oh yeah.
it's sort of true, but it's not exactly. I think it's one of these like weaponized incompetence slash unfortunate competence things where if you're the only one who knows how to do a thing, you are the misery sink for that thing. Uh, but I think that there are certain things that I'm so bad at doing that uh, if I start being the misery sink for them, other people will take over because they're just like, uh, there's no way that Hal should be the misery sink for this thing. And then there are
Right.
also certain things that people are kind of excited and passionate about. And like with Thorn and Pedalstick, which is, and the Unscripted Shakespeare Festival in general, like I'm certainly the misery sink for the Unscripted Shakespeare Festival. I'm just doing, like, I've spent the past 3 days, all I've been doing is wake up in the morning and all day do things for this festival. Well, I guess and the Fringe and some other, but all day I'm doing improv admin. But there's actually a huge amount of the Thorn and Pedalstick admin that gets done by different people in the group who aren't me, especially because I'm not even, within 1,000 miles of Thorn and Pedalstick right now. So we've got some people who are extremely talented at the sort of like numbers side of it and can figure out the logistics and stuff like that. We've got some people who are really good at knowing New York City and how it works and where to get spaces and where to be able to perform. Some people who are very social and kind of can do promotional elements, and some people who are really talented, at just the general like organizational side of a team of like having a clear style and promotional material and linked Instagram, linked social media accounts and just a million things that I wouldn't and organize Slack channels and, whatever, a million things that I wouldn't necessarily have done or thought about if left to my own devices. But that, and usually you're not even always aware of who's being the sync for what. Like sometimes someone comes into practice and they're just like, I am so stressed about this thing, and you didn't even realize they were doing it. So I think you got to keep an eye out for people and say big thank yous to people. And also kind of the ball will rotate. Even if you don't know who has the ball, like someone winds up with the ball.
Yeah.
But I don't think a group can work with just one sync. I think that's a kind of a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, delegation like is probably necessary.
Yeah.
Switching topics. Lana, do you think you're gonna do improv stuff in New York? Do you have plans for that?
I just don't know how to get into it. Like, I don't want to spend a bunch of money on a class, but I also don't know anyone, so I guess I have to. It's not like my number one priority right now, but I miss doing it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you two have already talked, but I
We
mean,
haven't talked that much about how to do improv in the city.
Yeah, no, not much.
Narrative improv is a sparse resource in New York City. If I were you, I obviously go to the Unscripted Shakespeare Festival. That is the best cheap way to learn narrative improv in the city, and I'll swear on that hill. I would also reach out to Improvise D&D with Sam Kamanitz and see what they're up to. They did auditions last fall, so it might be a little while before they do auditions again. But just going to their shows and getting involved, like kind of just making yourself known, I think it would be a good thing to do because they're awesome. And then the other, I don't know how the other narrative groups in the city get formed. You could obviously audition for the Armory teams, which are narrative but smaller, and there's no barrier to auditioning for those. Those have auditions 2 times a year. Other than that, yeah, you have to pay the piper. Or Lana, you're good enough at improv that you could, if you were willing to do the admin for it, do the admin for it. Like if you post in a lot of Facebook groups, I'm teaching an improv workshop and it costs this much money, and then use that to rent the space. You could home grow your own improv experiment and teach the people that you wanted to teach.
Mm-hmm.
What's the goated musical improv in New York?
The largest musical improv program is at the Magnet Theater, which has musical Megawatt every Friday night, which is just like 8 back-to-back 30-minute shows from different people in the community. And then it has a bigger show on Saturday called Premiere. And there's also individual musical improv at some of the other theaters. And there used to be the musical improv jam at the Pit, which was really fun. But it has disappeared. I like Hell Yeah, the musical improv group in the city. And then I think Baby Wants Candy and Shamilton are probably around doing things as well. And there's something that happens like in Midtown that maybe you could become a part of, Lana. I don't know. That is something like, I think it's a little more commercial. It's like Times Square musical improv or something like that. I have no idea what the path is there.
Lana directed our most recent run of musical improv that Hal and I did, and our last shows, and is very talented at musical improv for the listeners. I also love musical improv. I don't know when I will next do it, because I feel like, I don't know, maybe some people who are out in the Bay are into it, but Will is not very into it, at least.
Yeah. I mean, we're probably going to do a run of musical improv on the podcast at some point if we figure out the technical logistics. And that part of why Lana wasn't a guest yet is we were kind of saving her because we kept on being like, we're going to do it next season. Then being like, no, we can't figure this out. So in case that is a long way off, I would also just love to know, how did you guys break down the narrative structure for musicals? I thought it was really cool what you guys did when you were directing.
We took a bunch of musicals and tried to break down their plots kind of generally. And these are like wild oversimplifications. Usually 2-act musicals have like, they start in a world and you learn about that world. It's the first act. And you learn who all the characters are and you learn what they want and whatever. And then something big changes. And then the second act is kind of dealing with that change and coming to some kind of solution and revelation based on it. In different forms, we've created more specific like breakdowns. Like I taught a class a couple months ago that was like all about putting on a 30-minute musical. And it was like very specific, like this song, this is this song, this is this song, this is this song, this is this song. And it was 6 songs divided in act 1, act 2. And each song held a very specific purpose. It's like, this introduced the protagonist, this introduced the antagonist, this introduces the problem they face, whatever. I found that helpful for people who were not super experienced to have like a really specific outline. Especially when you have to do so much like you do with musical improv, where it's like you have to be a character and you have to make up songs and the songs have to make sense. And they don't just have to like be songs, but they also have to be songs that move the plot in a specific way or define the characters or the environment. So yeah, that it helps to have scaffolding for that.
That's exactly how they do it at the Magnet.
Yeah, I think when you're doing something like really, really technically difficult, like musical improv, it just helps having scaffolding.
For our earlier conversation, it does feel like musical improv might be one of those perfect mixes of like, obviously it has to be some degree of lighthearted or joyous because you're singing, but maybe one of the places that we had a lot of fun because we also do care a lot about narrative and whatnot. So maybe that is, Lana, your perfect mix of something lighthearted and something a little bit more dramatic.
Right.
Yeah.
One last thing, or I guess 2 more things before we go. I was wondering about the emotional side of kind of, being this, what you were kind of saying, sinkhole, but also of working with this. Julian already talked about the sort of people management side. When you're under situations of like really high octane intensity, like with Huppet, how do you, take care of yourself physically and mentally and get through those periods? And like, do you think it would be sustainable to do that on a regular basis, or what would you kind of need to change to make that so?
I mean, I think if you want to do like, amateur theater or theater in general, like you just have to want things so bad because nobody cares if your play or your improv show happens. Nobody cares. So you have to put the full force of it. You have to be the one to say this needs to exist and put that burden on yourself. And I don't know. I think to some extent it's necessary that you like that's just like a difficult thing to do.
You must suffer.
I mean, suffer is a strong word. Being stressed out about your play is like pretty low key suffering wise, But yeah, you gotta want it. I don't know. As far as like sustainability, I mean, it's not like you're doing it every month,
Yeah. That's true.
But I feel like anyone can, like, I look back on Hobbit, I've never worked harder on anything in my life. And I'm not like, oh, that was so hard. Like, I look back on it and I'm so happy that it happened and that I had all those experiences. And I would be so happy if I were to get to feel that way again. I mean, I feel like that's life. Like, sometimes things kind of suck, but you're glad that they sucked.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think that would have been better if you'd written it.
It's just hard, I think. because yeah, the sync can take this mentality of, yeah, I'm gonna like just go sicko mode for the next few months and I'm gonna make this happen, yada yada yada. Uh, yeah, it's just the other people I feel like is the thing that always complicates it. And I guess we already talked about trying to take off as much as you can from them. But I don't know, it's a weird loop when the person who's in charge of the project, this is more general for anything, but like when the person who's in charge is like putting in 110%, I guess it feels important to also signal to the rest of the people that that's not necessary if it's not, or it's just always a hard line to draw, which makes me over the past couple of years more into like smaller productions where you have less people, because either you have to really manage these expectations of I'm going to do all this stuff, and while I would want you to do this stuff, like you don't have to be a part of this, or you just need a set of people who is all going to be down to do the thing. So I don't know, I guess it just gets fundamentally harder the more people you add to things. My thought, and maybe feels like the bottleneck for actually doing things that are big and interesting and amateur.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's easiest to be successful when you are lucky enough to know people who are capable of the things that are maybe not super interesting, but actually just genuinely love them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like people who like building things and like plugging in wires and stuff. The people exist.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they're in high demand.
Yeah. All right. The true last thing of the podcast is, which is better, Lana's Public Diary or Julian B?
Ooh.
I'm more consistent than you.
Okay, that's true right now. I've actually been working this past week on getting some more stuff done. Look, you can just as you might go to your Twitter feed to get your consistent dose of tweets, you can go to your email to get your consistent Lana Public Diary. But if you want something long thought, something over a year in the making, I think that you should hold out and not claim a favorite until this next Julian B comes out.
Yeah, I think a well-rounded media diet probably includes both.
Oh,
Yeah.
And
That's fair.
are these both public institutions? Can the listener subscribe to Lana's Public Diary or Julian B?
No, the listener can email me with the application, and I'm accepting. I'll accept any application, but
it's Lana's semi-public diary.
What's the application email, Julian, that you have to email?
You can email the julianb@gmail.com if you want to be added to the Julian B. Just send your application. It's typically for people I know, but if you have something interesting about you, maybe I'll add you.
Wonderful. All right, that was my last thing. You have anything, Julian? Besides,
I just when is the whale going to be done?
As soon as possible. It's for a production in SF, so I need to mail it, and that takes a while. So as soon as I get it done, I can send pictures.
Lana, do you have anything that you want to pub?
No.
Not even a concept, an idea?
Maybe give me a job. That's kind of all I got.
Oh, yeah,
pub
Lana.
I can't get a job, but we don't have to talk about this.
Are you #open to work?
I'm probably not as #open to work as I should be.
Well, I mean, yeah, for the financiers who listen to us, who are looking to fund a young creative in New York who has quirky things like a whale hanging in her room. You can send your application to fundlana to thejulianb@gmail.com, and I'll review and see if this is an appropriate source of funding, and I'll get back to you, Lana.
Oh.
I appreciate that.
All right. Then, without further ado, this has been Muprov
Musings.
So, my sign off is that I'm going to be performing in the Liverpool Improv Festival next week.
Oh. What's
so
the concept?
All our Liverpool listeners, you should go there. It's going to be an amazing festival. I'm going to be performing on my birthday in a show called Taxi Tales.
What's that?
I think it's based on Night on Earth, which is this movie that I saw in a random little indie theater with Sasha. I could be wrong about that, but it seems similar to that movie. Taxi Tales is a show with 10 improvisers and 3 taxis. 3 of the improvisers are drivers. 1 is a taxi controller, and the rest are passengers. And you see snippets of scenes between passengers and drivers having conversations.
That sounds like a pretty flexible but high potential format.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. My one thing I'm nervous about is that it takes place in the 1990s, where I did not take place in the 1990s.
You touched it, right?
No, I didn't touch it. Maybe in the womb. I touched it in the womb. But
who else is going to be in the show? How many people?
So I don't know. There are 10 people. I applied for it by giving them my improv background and submitting a 1-minute audio recording. Thank you, Muprov Musings, of me pretending to be a passenger in a taxi. There was one other person that I recognized in the ensemble, who's a big improviser in the UK. Except there are 2 ensembles, and they're in the opposite ensemble to me. And other than that, I'm really excited to meet people. I'm so excited for it. This is my first international festival where I got accepted to perform, and it's right nearby. I can just take a train over. And I'm really excited to meet all these UK improvisers, take workshops, have a birthday, get older.
Sounds freaking awesome.
I narrowly missed doing it before turning 25. But really, I was born at like 6 p.m. So basically right as I turned 25, I think it's actually in the afternoon. So right before I turn 25, I will have performed in my first international improv festival as a member of the ensemble.
Woo! Liverpool, that's where the Scousers are, no?
I don't know. It's like the Beatles place, right?
Oh, sure.
This is, oh my God. I'm so hoping I'm not a driver in the show. Because I think the show probably takes place in Liverpool. I barely have my driver's license. if they're like, all right, now drive around Liverpool and realistically engage in front of an audience full of Liverpoolians about what it's like to be a taxi driver in Liverpool. Man, am I going to do a bad job with that. But that's okay. You got to play the expert.
Yeah, you must.
I'm really excited. I'm really, really excited.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
Yeah. Would you want to be a taxi driver, a passenger, or a radio operator? The radio operator is kind of like a director. They choose when scenes end and what scenes come next.
I guess I'd want to be a passenger. Mm-hmm. Just seems like the best role.
The driver gets to be in twice as many scenes as the passenger.
Yeah. There's a world where maybe I'd be better at being the driver than being the passenger, but I think it just seems more fun to be the passenger. You get to play like a probably crazier character, or just more interesting character.
I think they don't really want you playing crazy characters, from what I can read from their promotional material. There were like 30 things in it that was like, don't play crazy people.
But do you think that they're tamping down, like, crazy at the level of like, because there's because in a certain sense you probably do want interesting characters at least. Maybe what I have in my head.
I think you're right. I think that probably they're like, we don't know all of these improvisers, and the craziest thing that an improviser can do is so wildly away from what we want to happen that if we tell them all not to be crazy, what they'll do is closer to what we actually want.
see me now? Can't you see me now? Everything is changing. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now?